Hello, this is John McGowan with Team Mavericks Stock Company. I'm here with John Davis and Sheena Patel. We'll take you through an update of our UMass 660 marketing, Dr. Rada Jerry's Marstrat financial analysis and simulation. From an agenda standpoint, we will go through the team stock strategy, what we focused on, R&D, how we developed our products, target segments, how we position those products, channels, what we focused on to place them into the appropriate channels, advertising, commercial, and price summary, then an individual brand summary for the various results. Then we'll look at an overall results and then lessons learned. From a strategy standpoint, we focused on prioritizing the markets for the most profitable or underserved segments. We went to the well-designed brands. That was our main target, to be at the top of the profitability so we could generate R&D funding, advertisement, commercial budgets. Again, we targeted the upper price point for each segment, and then with that, we were able to staff full-time equivalent heads and the right channels per segment. We also used extensive market research to promote a quality message, and then production-wise, we focused on the market forecast, market shares, and brand surveys. To give a little introduction to how the team did, team stock is the blue line here. You can see we had a couple significant dips. We had two errors that we'll speak about in detail that dropped us in period 1, and also we ran into trouble in period 4, and we'll speak in detail of that. But overall, if you look, we had a pretty nice trend on our earnings before tax, where the company did well despite some substantial errors that we'll speak to. On the R&D front, we invested $10.6 million in total spend. That enabled $310 million in contribution margin. So a heavy R&D deck to help us reposition to make sure we were meeting customer brand characteristics requirements, and then tailoring those to basically win each of the targeted segments. On the team summary, for the brands we focused on, our SOX was targeted the Explorer market, the Solo 2, the shopper segment, our SoStar on the professional segment, SoHigh on the high earners, and then Soft on the Saver segment. And if you look at the segment size, which is what this is for the Sonnets, the number one where we really needed our priority was on the shopper segment. The professional and the high earners, they basically tailored out and flattened off without nearly the growth rate that was anticipated in the shopper segment, and as well a really nice growth on the Saver. And then as expected, the Explorer market, it continued to taper off. And then that's how we stacked our resource to prioritize on Solo as our top moneymaker. High earners brought in a nice profit margin, but not quite the volume, and then the remaining brands. And as we'll talk, we should have probably prioritized and taken some of these brands down further and these up, given the complications that we got into with a couple of significant errors. And Sheena Patel, can you take us through the marketing summary?
Okay, thank you, John. So here on this slide, essentially what we wanted to do was highlight the fact that we were the only company to have 5 brands targeting each of those segments. We have the Explorers, the shoppers, professionals, high earners, and savers covered with the 5 brands that we had launched in the differing periods. So really to look at some of the reasons why potentially there were reduced sales or reduced how we didn't do as well. So if we target, if we look at the savers, you can see that Soft, here we compared to the brand that did quite well, which was we were low on FTE, so it was 65 versus 85. In addition, we were low on advertising spend, so we were at 3.2 million compared to 8 million, so a very significant difference. This trend followed through into the professionals, where we have the SoStar brand as well. So again, we were low on FTEs with 57 compared to sort of around the 65s for our direct competitors, and then marginally less advertising. So what we did, what we tried to focus in on with our strategy was to really target the distribution channels per brand in each of the segments. So taking into what that forecast would look like, and making sure that our FTEs were distributed evenly compared to the channel distributions to result in an overall good strategy. Okay, so next slide, please. So going through our individual brands, so as suggested previously, we have 5 of these. So the first one that we will speak to will be Solo 2. So this one was launched in period 2 and to specifically target the shopper market. So this was a repositioning of an original brand, Solo. And again, as John had alluded to earlier, this segment showed great growth over time, and our strategy was to really focus this brand and ensure that we captured that growing market. So in terms of results, there was a 1.1 million investment that was put into this brand for the repositioning, yielding 105 million in revenue. At peak, the share that this brand took was at 53.1%. However, over time, we saw a gradual drop in that share, resulting in a sharp decrease to 16.7% at the end of period 6. And some of these errors and some of the reasons behind this will be discussed a little bit later on. So one good note with this was that we ended on strong brand awareness, which was on par with many of our competitors. However, not yielding the sales that we had anticipated it would. In terms of lessons learned, one thing that hurt us quite badly with most of our brands in the strategy was heavy upfront R&D costs limited our commercial and advertising spend, as highlighted on the previous slide, where we were a lot below our direct competitors, both in FTEs and advertising. So to go forward, we would want to make sure we have adequate advertising and FTE budget for greater success. Okay, so next slide, please. So with our SoStar, this brand was launched in period 3, and it was essentially aimed at targeting the professional segment. Initially, we had wanted to also capture additional explorer and high earners in this segment, but the team quickly realised that a more focused strategy just targeting professionals and their needs in that would enhance our performance. And you can see that we've got really good growth from period 2 going up to period 4. There was a 1.8 million investment that we had made, yielding 63 million in results. So as mentioned, this one was launched in period 3, capturing a really good market share upon launch at 34.7%. However, we did, over the periods from launch, start seeing a gradual decline in the market share. But again, we did end with good brand awareness with this brand. I think, again, in terms of lessons learned, we had limited resources for some of the adjustments and changes that were made to the brand across the different periods. We just didn't have the resources to support the advertising and FTE dollars to ensure greater success compared to the amount of dollars that were invested by our direct competitors, and that's where our performance was harmed. So I'm now going to pass the slides over to John Davis to take us through our remaining brands and conclusions.
Thanks, Gina. So in maintaining the theme of going to each individual market segment, we went on to target the saver segment with our Soft 2 brand. This was initially proposed to be a modification to the original Soft brand. We made a slight error in the modification and actually launched a whole new Soft 2 brand. This was, as outlined, intended to take that low-end saver market. So this was our low-end product. We needed a lot of volume with admittedly lower margins to try to capture this market. So this was like I said, a reposition of soft into the Soft 2 brand. There's a $1.5 million investment yielding $63 million in contribution margin. In P3, we peaked out at 37.4% market share. At that time, that's when our closest competitor, Note, in this segment, got very, very aggressive and continued to take market share through the remaining periods. P6 share dropped 25%. With primarily being in the purchase intentions. The percent awareness was there, but the intentions was down. In the interest of trying to gain that market share back from our primary competitor, in the last period, we decreased the price and actually lost share in that segment. So the vital errors, the lessons learned down there, the vital error was launching Solar 2 as a new brand versus the modification as described earlier. The P6 reduced price was not as effective as originally intended. We lost awareness, purchase intentions, where our sales and budget continue to grow. Next slide, please. So the StoX brand was intended to capture the Explorer market. So at the time that this was launched in P3, there was no brand currently meeting this specific market segment's needs. So we intended to go in and capture this market of the Explorers. The initial price going in, outlined here, they're extremely price sensitive and required a very significant features in order to capture this market. So the $1.6 million investment returned $3 million in contribution margin. We launched at a significant 22% market share, and then took 58% of market segment by P6, and admittedly sold out there. So the lessons learned, launched in P3 with the 600K X inventory for 700K loss. Again, as outlined earlier, when the underserved market was design channel and the price in this segment. This was probably ignored by many other brands just because of the shrinking forecast of the Explorer market. So we wanted to try to capture as much as we possibly could of this market, even though it was declining. Next slide, please. And the final market that we intended to capture here was the high earner market. There were existing two brands that were trying to capture the high earner market with declining market share, as outlined in the graph. So design and price was our strategy to try to dominate this and take over the Nova market share with very, very high margins for this product. The results was we invested $870K with returns of $45 million, and our contribution margin there with by P6 we had 66% awareness at 47% intention and quality of our message. This was a highly successful brand, as we earned 44% of that high earner market share with only a few periods after launch. One of the key lessons learned here is that we developed the SoX brand before the SoHigh brand. This resulted in an overall error in our strategy, as we could have developed this earlier and launched to gain even more market share and increasing margin dollars as well. We made one other vital error with this brand in period 4. We actually had a technological error in ordering and production units. So we actually meant to order 80,000 units in production, and somewhere along the way included 800,000 units, and so that was a major error on our ordering for production of this unit. Next slide, please. So in terms of conclusion, for the Maverick team's stock, our results was we finished in second place in our share price index. After being in P2, we were actually in last place, and by P4 we got to first place. Our cumulative net contribution of $310 million was incredible and finished in the top of our market there. We did take out a $5 million loan, which helped contribute to launching the new brands. We did have a couple of errors outlined in the graph to the right, some of those simulation errors with the red arrows shown in P2 and in P5, as discussed earlier. So those errors impacted our budget, and we were able to therefore be outspent on the ads and the commercial full-time employees. But as outlined there, we overall built a very solid business. Next slide, please. Some of the lessons learned that we took from this is number one, outline that we can't make kind of silly mistakes, basically stupid mistakes. We launched that So High brand and ordered 800,000 units where we meant to order 80,000 units. We took a large hit there. And in P1, where we had new products launched as opposed to modifications, impacted our bottom line significantly and also decreased our ability to use that additional budget in full-time employees and advertising. Another lesson learned is to borrow funding in period one, so we could have borrowed earlier and then being able to pay off that loan at an earlier period also. And the last 2 points is don't let the competition out-invest you. It seems like we kind of stretched ourselves thin in our advertising and budget with the diminished number that we had to begin with. We had a few extra brands where we had 5 brands to try to hit every market segment. Other brands were able to capture larger segments of the overall of their targeted markets where we were trying to capture perhaps too much of each market share. And finally, we did not purchase all the market studies early on in the period, and that led to diminished information in terms of what everyone else was doing. Overall, it was a great experience, lessons learned. We know what we can do better next time, and thank you for your time.